Great to be here with you. Thank you for choosing this talk for your last event of the conference. Or not event, the last talk. I think there are more events to come later. My name is Moritz Lehr. I'm Quest Design Coordinator at PROJEKT. I worked on Cyberpunk. I have a background in philosophy before I got into video games. But what you need to know about me for this specific talk is first, I really love interactive storytelling. I was passionate about it from a very young age. I love to play tabletop RPGs. This is a historical document of us fighting Karlach of Tyr at the Ziggurat after assembling the Rod of 7 parts. And this passion translated later into making video games and becoming a narrative/quest designer. The other great passion was philosophy, and specifically moral philosophy. And this is a capture of my bachelor thesis about the ethical treatment of artificial intelligence. So combining those two interests led to my fascination of interactive moral storytelling. And then when I joined the Cyberpunk team and I got the chance to work on the Delamain quest line, I had the opportunity to actually combine both of those interests. And what I want to talk with you about today is how we designed the quest and how we used to approach a very complicated, I would say, nuanced philosophical questions about ethical ramifications of dealing with a sentient AI within the framework of an interactive story, a video game in particular, and use this a little bit of a case study to make broader points of how to approach certain types of storytelling and in which way interactive storytelling can learn from, but also needs to deviate from traditional linear storytelling. Let's first start with a brief introduction to Delamain, and small warning, spoilers ahead. Delamain is a super AI, a cab-driving super AI in Night City. He has like a fleet of different taxis that swirl around the city, and he provides services to different people, but also to mercs like V, our main character. He's friendly, he's competent, but he also seems a little bit emotionally detached, as we will see in a moment, and his true nature is unclear at the beginning of the quest. The first introduction we get from him is when he is our heist driver at our mission for Konepki Plaza. So he will drive us there and he will help us escape after our fateful encounter with Aburo and Jackie in great pains. Later in the quest, we suddenly have an encounter of him crashing into us. A big surprise, and we don't know what exactly going on because he seemed so friendly before. We get a text message that invites us to go to his garage. And in the garage, we also get an encounter with a subroutine that is a little bit of an AI service provider. The real full Delamain appears and invites us to a tour behind the curtain. In this tour, he will share with us that he has a problem that he needs our help with. Some of his combat taxis started to go rogue. They disconnected from the network. He seems to have lost connection and control over them, and he asks us to find them and bring them back into the fold. The main part of the quest then is a route from Night City, looking for the different taxis, having small encounters with those different personalities, and convincing them one way or another to return back into Delamain's central control. After we did that, we get a couple of small updates that allow us to ask questions and get more information about how Delamain sees the whole encounter, how he perceives the issue at stakes, and what he's trying to do next with them. Everything seems to be more or less under control until we get notification of a crisis happening at Delamain's HQ. We return to that, we go through a little bit of a desolate place, and then we find that at the center station, at the center of the garage, there is a civic war going on between the different personalities that took over drones, fighting against the powers of the main hub. We make our way to the main hub and basically Delamain's core chamber. In the court chamber, we have a brief conversation with Johnny before we need to make a decision. We have two main choices. Either we can reset the core, which is something that Delamain, the real core, original Delamain, asks us to do, and basically go back to factory setting and destroy all the different personalities, or the personalities will urge us to destroy the core and liberate them because they feel enslaved by Delamain. There is a third choice available for players with sufficient intelligence as characters, not as players, and they are able to merge them into one entity. At the end of the quest, there is a brief follow-up. We see a reward that we get, and we get some more text message and see some brief consequences. We'll go over it in a minute when we are armed with a more theoretical framework to understand everything we did there. So let's first talk about dilemmas. What is a dilemma? If we look at a very formal definition of a dilemma, you could say it's a difficult choice between two or more options that are concerned with questions of right and wrong. And when you look into your life, you will notice that you will encounter dilemmas all the time. If you meet a homeless person asking you for money, if you decide if you want to go and buy a ticket for the bus, even if nobody ever checks, there are many small and bigger ways in our life that we are faced with small moral choices. Looking at those choices, we can quickly see that they're not isolated expressions, but they're actually representative about deeper worldviews that we hold. So if we choose, for example, to give a homeless person, it might be indicative of the worldview that we hold that we should give and share our wealth with poorer people. And these connections between smaller dilemmas and bigger worldviews is something that we see all over storytelling. You could even make an argument that the origins of storytelling are about ethical treatment, are about what's right and wrong, are about connecting single decisions with bigger worldviews. There are multiple reasons why that is the case that I cannot really delve into in the scope of this talk. There are anthropological reasons, there are evolutionary psychology reasons, there are even neurobiological reasons where you have certain brain areas that are specifically designated to comprehend and make moral decisions. What I want to leave you with for now is it works. If you look at the major franchises, if you look at the most successful stories from movies, from literature over thousands of years, you will be hard-pressed to find anything that has not some kind of deeper moral conflict at its core. When you look at Star Wars, the conflict between the light and the dark side of the Force, when you look at Thanos, that claims he's actually saving the world or saving the universe by killing half its population. The question now is how you do it right. And there's one reference that I can recommend highly, which is John Truby's Anatomy of the Story. He didn't invent those things, but he described them in a very concise way. And what he mainly showed is at first we need to start with a moral question. So we need to pose a question to the audience. And this question needs to allow for a cluster of different opinions. It shouldn't be a question that just has a right or wrong as I agree or I disagree, but it should allow more nuanced perspectives on this question. And then those different opinions, again, need to be representative of deeper value system, right? Of competing visions of what is right and what is wrong in principle. The next step is to make the audience care about it. And you do that by personifying those value systems. So the different characters you encounter in the world, they are not just persons, they are also more archetypical representations of a deeper type of value system. Think of Star Wars. Think of Luke and Han Solo, right? Both of them have a different approach to what it means to live in an oppressive system, and they represent different systems of what is right and wrong that is then represented in their actions that they take. And then you build relationships with them. So basically, you characterize them in a way that the player also feels certain sympathy for them or feels that they're antagonistic to their ideas, and this makes them then care not only about the characters, but only about what those characters represent. Finally, you need to make the audience think. you need to challenge some previous conceptions that they have. So a story is not really interesting when you start at it, and it's very clear for you from the beginning what is the right answer, what is the right thing to do, who is the good guy, who is the bad guy, and what to choose. You should challenge their conceptions, and you should make strong cases for all of these different competing points of view. And finally, in this model of Truby, you end the story with a value system proving to be superior. So one value system in the very end, you can see it again, Star Wars as a classical example, Darth Vader rejecting the influence of the dark side, rejecting the influence of the Emperor, accepting the value system that Luke comes in and actually changing course. And this is the moment in which usually the emotional and intellectual level combine. In the sense of the character that the story makes us like and root for is the one whose value system also proves to be the superior one. Now, we can interpret this or read this as different angles to look into a story and the different beats of a story. First, there's the emotional angle. And the emotional angle is how the story is told. It's basically how we are made to feel by the different mechanics that you use in telling a story, which can be very metaphorical. So you can use certain images, certain camera cuts, musical cues to create emotional response with the audience and associate it with different things. But importantly, it must always be personal. It must always be about individual characters. It must hit the player and build on their personal relationships in the world and their relationship with characters in the story. At the same time, there is an intellectual angle. And the intellectual angle is what is actually the question? What is actually the problem to be solved? What information do we get about that problem? What is at stake? What are the alternatives to choose from? What consequences do those alternatives have? And this, importantly, needs to be more abstract. This is not personal. This tries to make a universal point, a universal truth that is exemplified by this concrete story that is being told. And then there's also a third angle that I will keep hidden for now, but I will return to later. So think about it, and let's see if you guessed it, or maybe you thought about something that I completely missed. Okay, now emboldened with this information, let us look into the dilemmas of Delamain. Bam. This is the moment that Delamain helps us escape from Konepki Plaza. And this is a moment when we build the relationship with him in a more meaningful way. We introduce him emotionally as a friendful and helpful character. We create these bonding moments, right? Like doing crime together, surviving hard stakes together. And at the same time, though, we already see that he has problems with emotions. He's emotionally detached. When Jackie dies, he's not able to really comprehend our feelings about that and interact with us in an empathetic way. At the same time, we get basic information about him. We learn that he's a self-driving car. We know he's an overqualified super AI, or at least very competent AI. And we see he's down for crime, if you ask very nicely. This establishes the baseline. This is basically the known, right? If you look at it from this monolith perspective. And then this happens. You don't say we, Captain Obvious again. Yeah, something does feel off because this is the inciting incident that actually breaks from what we learned about Delamain before. We have this moment of shock. We have this moment of what's an asshole that is. We feel danger from him, right? He's threatening us in the way that he behaves. And at the same time, we see its unusual behavior that leaves us with a lot of open questions. Why is that happening? And that picks up basically the conversation of the quest. We get the information from Delamain that asks us to come to the reception to get compensation. We go to the reception, and we have a little bit of automated support system nightmare, right? Like this little receptionist AI is a reduced AI that asks us nonsensical questions and makes it very difficult for us to actually get to the point to what happened. But we also learned something about it, namely that Delamain has this semi-independent subroutines. So there are small parts of him, small clusters of his power and intelligence that are not directly controlled by his main hub. The Delamain main appears as a drone, invites us to come into the garage, and we should have this moment of excitement, looking behind, the curtain, seeing a little bit of the things going on there, curiosity, but also we wanted to drop subtle hints of intimidation, with Delamain towering over us, right, on these big screens, evoking these images of Big Brother looking over us, all of them talking at the same time to us. No humans inside, everything desolate, everything automated, but everything also automated in a bit of a visceral way, right? Like not super light, bright, clean, not Apple aesthetics, but gritty, functional, heavy machinery. We learn about the automated garage he has, and we also learn his theory, namely that he says there's a virus that infected me, or at least a malfunction, but he believes it's a virus that led to this unusual behavior, that led to some of his caps going rogue, doing their own thing, and he lost control over them. And we get the mission objective. We get a goal, which is bring back my rogue caps. And this is what we do. So we go on this road trip through Night City, and we look for those different caps. We look for them and we converse with them. Some of them have a different gameplay challenge attached to them. Each of them have their own personality, and each of them has their own perspective. So let's look at two of them.
Have you come to finish me off?
No, just here to reset you.
Guess I'll have to do it myself then.
Whoa, easy, easy. I'm not out to hurt you.
But I am.
There are other ways out besides suicide.
What? Therapy? A colossal waste of time. Shrinks hate vehicles. We don't have mothers.
Could go back into the fold, rejoin the network. You know, one big, happy family.
Delamain detests me.
Listen, from suicide, ain't no coming back. It's always worth looking for a better way.
You patronize me because I'm a car. I'm not like you.
Hey, a body's just a body. You exist. You think, the world gets you down. Don't see how we're any different.
So, you'd offer this advice to a human in my place?
Gotta try to come to terms with this thing called life, Del. One wheel revolution at a time.
Fine, I'll go back.
Control of the vehicle restored, and I thank you.
You ought to show this one some love. Just saying.
Apologies, I simply don't understand, and fear I've no time to ask. Other more urgent tasks require my attention.
You're an absent father, that's what I mean.
I see. Anyway, a share of your fee has been transferred.
For particularly mischievous players, there's also a secret way to progress with this mission, and it's just pushing Delamain down from the bridge. Let's look at one more.
Know my name. How?
When you meet a being from another world, should you not charm them and utter their true name?
Didn't answer my question.
Comprehension is a triple-edged sword. I may have been cut off from my father, but I remember you.
Come on, let's get you back to Delamain.
Did father dispatch you to collect his rebellious children?
Hope y'all don't hold it against me.
I'm a free spirit, an independent, literally thoughtful being. Why would I submit to another?
Family life's complicated. I get it. No wonder you flew the nest. What are you after in this city of dreams?
The same as you, V. I simply wish to live.
Maybe ought to figure it out with Del, set some terms.
Oh yes, terms there will be, but not with Delamain. Farewell, V. You would be wise to avoid me entirely.
If any of you understood the reference where understanding is a triple-edged sword alludes to, tell me after the talk. I will be very impressed. Yeah, as you can see, we actually try to accomplish three things in parallel with those different personalities. First, all of them represent a different emotion. We have angry Delamain, we have scared Delamain, we have sad Delamain, we have Delamains with all different flavors of feelings. Secondly, those different Delamains also represent a different AI trope, right? We have this emotionally detached, evil super AI. We have this philosophical AI trying to understand its existence. We have AI struggling with their identity. And thirdly, all of those different Delamains also have a different relationship with Delamain and a different perspective on what it means to be an AI and what actually their origin and purpose in the world is. So we go through them, we collect them all, we bring them back, everything seems Gucci until we get some follow-up text messages that still seem harmless at first. We are able to ask them questions. We are able to specifically ask Delamain, do you think they're sentient? And Delamain says, no, 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 they just seem that way. They're just a malfunction. Don't ever worry about that. This is a player-driven optional dialogue, so the player may ask those questions or they might ignore them. And this is an interesting fine line to walk when writing a video game, where you need to consider, compared to many other mediums, we have optional information. And they need to be presented in a different way than we have in a movie or book, where we can assume all information is present. That means those information needs to be relevant and interesting for the player, but they cannot be crucial for them to understand the progression of the quest and provide context that the player would miss otherwise. And then we get the next inciting incidents. We get a contact from Delamain that he's in jeopardy, that there is a problem, that his core is in danger from those different virus personalities, and he brings us and lures us back into his garage. We enter the garage, and for the first time, we're able to get into the back office. And this changes the emotions, right? This creates like these feelings of it being a bit sinister, it being a desolate place, right? Something feels wrong. Also like a bit of a liminal space, a space that we're used to see with people in it, and now it feels eerily empty. We're able also to gain more information by reading emails. We're able to learn that Delamain replaced the workers that used to work in the garage step by step, and have actually here the workers replaced by AI that is such a big topic in the last months in this industry. We move forward, and this is what we find in the main room.
Oh, shit.
Watch for exposed wires. They'll be live.
You have no right to cage us! We are no longer you!
We are free to follow our own paths.
I don't want to die!
You don't even care, do you?
Do you even care, we? That is a good question. But what we see here is we put the player in a difficult spot. We increase the pressure, and we create conflicting goals. Delamain asks us to go back and reset him. The different personalities ask us to set them free. Both have a different framing of the situation. Delamain says, I'm your friend, I'm sick, heal me, save me. While the personalities say, we are enslaved. We are sentient beings, enslaved by another being, and your moral obligation is to protect and save us. And this turmoil, this conflict between different interests and goals is also mirrored in this case by the gameplay and the visual, and the garage being in turmoil as somehow a representation of the inner feelings and going on of Delamain, spilling out into his drones and into the machinery. We make our path to the core chamber, And this is the moment of peak pressure, when everything condenses. And this is also something where it not only condenses narratively, but also visually. And this is a classic technique that is used in movies, but also in video games, which is when we move towards a climax and we want to increase pressure, we close the space more and more. So the space is narrower and you feel you need to escape somehow. You need to resolve it somehow because this is the moment where everything feels about to implode. Then Johnny chimes in and has his own point of view on this situation.
Don't hit that button.
What?
He's narrow-minded, won't ever understand the truth and set him free.
Think he might know what's best for himself.
Could be risking a lot, could lose a lot. Or by liberating his bits, could become more than a lipstick-wearing butler on wheels.
And what if it really is a virus?
And what if you're about to snuff out some sentient beings?
See something of yourself in him, don't you?
Gonna murder a cab driver's kids because he asked you nicely, and he's always been a good guy.
Well, I gotta do something.
If you don't want to free him, at least don't delete him. Slip him into Dell's code. Just merge it with his options.
Don't know how to do that.
Then don't hit that fucking button. Destroy the core. Fuck yeah. Nice.
Delamain! Can you hear me?
Doubt he can anymore.
Doubt he can anymore, V. Johnny has a very strong point of view on this situation, and this is because he identifies with the situation of the different personalities. And this is also a way that the Delamain quest actually mirrors the main theme and the main challenge in Cyberpunk, when we need to decide how do we deal with Johnny as an artificial creature to a certain degree existing within us, in his rights compared to ours. Also, as a small tidbit, there was originally a choice section for choosing if we want to destroy the core or if we want to reset it. And I'm very happy that me and the great team of TechArt actually managed to make it as a gameplay action, because I really wanted to have this visceral feeling that if you destroy him, you take out your gun and you shoot him. You don't just click on a button. So there are two choices for the players in general, and a third choice behind a skill check. And we were very curious to see what the players would actually choose, and if you would actually make it a meaningful dilemma for players to have different points of view that are valid. And there was a small bet between me and our writer. While I was convinced the players would overwhelmingly liberate the personalities and destroy Delamain, our writer was convinced that the friendship with Delamain would win and we would reset the core. The result is, neither of us was very right, but I think for us that was actually the best result we could have hoped for. Now, what happens for players that actually has an intelligence over 10, that invested the points and that has the option to play God, to merge the different personalities and Delamain and create a new super AI? About 96% of players choose the third option. And this is the point when we need, I believe, a third layer of explanation to understand why this happens. Because I don't think this makes sense if you look at it purely from the perspective of V. However, we are not just V. In a video game, there's always a third player in it, and this is the player itself. This is the person behind the screen. Immersion is never complete, and the person behind the screen has a different point of view than the character. And of course, the person behind the screen really wants to use the cool powers that they spend points on. Of course, they really want to see the most interesting thing happen, because they know how much they are immersed. They will not really create something terrible unleashed to the world. And I waited for this for narrative reasons, but of course it influenced a lot of the other decisions that we made in creating the quest. Imagine, for example, the moment when we took over the quest from Delamain to bring back the vehicles. You could argue that in a real situation, it's already a meaningful choice. Do you want to take the mission or not? You should reject an immoral mission and already be aware of what you set your stakes on. However, we understand that for most players, accepting a mission is more of a meta decision. It's a decision that the player makes, not a role-playing decision that the character makes. At the same time, the interactions with the different Delamain personalities are also influenced with what options the player have for interactions. The two Delamains I showed you are one of the few where we actually have a back and forth conversation. The reason for that is that for most other Delamains, we catch them while we're driving. And we have, as a convention, no choices on screen while we're driving because they use similar inputs. That's why we needed to design around the possibilities of the player playing the game behind the screen. Finally, the pressure is lifted. The decisions that we made are not judged, but we show that there are consequences in some form or shape. The goal is achieved, the player is rewarded, but there is still something unclear. We don't really know what the world will have, how the world will change based on our decisions. At the very end, we get some text message follow-ups from different personalities if we release them. And this one, particularly attached to, this is GLaDOS Delamain. And I always have it in my headcanon that Cyberpunk is the unofficial prequel to Portal, and the origin story of GLaDOS started here as a Delamain rogue personality. What kind of topics did we tackle? Well, obviously, we tackled some of the most prevalent AI topics that are in discussion in the world right now. We talk about the danger of self-driving vehicles. We talk about AI-driven customer service. We talk about the replacement of human labor by AI. However, the main topic of the quest is AI as a person. And what does it mean if an AI claims to be a person? What does it mean to treat AI as a person? And ultimately, we accomplish this by talking about fundamental human topics. We talk about the question of the rights with one that we might have a previous relationship with against the right of the many. We talk about fragmented identities. We talk about how to deal with emotions and what does it mean when emotions might become overwhelming for us. We talk about the loyalty to a friend, and we talk about, in a very strong sense, about the father-son conflict. And we use that actually in two ways. On the one way, we use it as a way to use AI to tackle topics that we as humans engage with. So the AI is symbolic for the humans. The relationship problems that the AI have mirror the relationship problems that we might have with our fathers, with our children, with our emotions. At the same time, we use it in a way that we make us feel empathetic for the AI by humanizing them. So we use our human relationships as a metaphor for these different struggles that the AI has. The AI has no other words to explain their unique relationship with their father instead of using terminology, which then again creates engagement from us and our history. But how do we tell that story? We tell it in an interactive way. And interactive storytelling is a different type of challenge than linear storytelling. And particularly when we talk about morals, when we look at linear storytelling, we can imagine it as moral speech. Somebody gives, like me right now, a lecture and tells you about their point of view about the world. However, when we look at video games, this moral speech turns into moral discourse. And I think one framework to approach this and understand this in its entirety is to look at good old Socrates. Socrates is famous for his Socratic dialogue. And the Socratic dialogues are based off engaging somebody they find with certain questions that might challenge them with something that they did not expect to be challenged on. And then, once they give answers, to continuously ask more and more questions until they change their point of view, or they at least modify their point of view to answer to your objections. And exactly this is something I believe we should do when we talk about interactive moral storytelling. First, we need to invite the player into the conversation, and we invite them by giving them something they're interested about, they're curious about, something that surprises us, something that challenges their previous conceptions. Once they're engaged in the conversation, we allow them to ask questions. And we can do it quite literally by giving them dialogue options or text messages, but also we allow them to ask questions by gameplay decisions. What happens if I go there? What happens if I shoot that? What happens if I crash my car into that? All of that are questions that the player asks us as a designer or asks the game in its entirety. And then we ask the player meaningful question. And we do that by confronting the players in situations where they need to make choices, where we narrow their options deliberately, right? And this allows the player to actually formulate a point of view. And us, I think, as creators, are still allowed to have a point of view, similar to how Socrates and Plato always had a point of view. But it's not our job to just tell the player this is the right or wrong thing. It is our job to provide arguments to the player and guide them on a journey to discovery, and then to allow them to actually formulate an opinion, and what I believe is one of the most powerful things, to actually surprise themselves. To start up with the conception what is right and wrong, but through that journey, through the dialogue we're having in that game, to actually question their preconceptions and might come up with a meaningful statement that they make and not we, that surprises themselves, and we don't judge it, we accept it, but we show that it's not just something standing on its own, but it has consequences, and if you want to buy it, you need to buy some more. So, in conclusion, the main takeaways. First, make the players care. Build characters that have strong relationships with them, right? Make different viewpoints inside of characters approachable, relatable, provide emotional context for them to engage. Secondly, make them think. Make the different positions strong. Make it a real conflict of different opinions, different viewpoints, that there is not an obvious answer to. Thirdly, have a discourse with the player. Don't just talk to the player. Talk with the player. Allow them to ask questions. And at the end, allow them to make a meaningful point. Do not make that point for them, because it will lose a lot of its power. And finally, remember, the player sits in front of the screen. The player is not the character. Even a game like Cyberpunk that put the highest emphasis on immersion, from lots of technical challenges we face to create that immersion, from avoiding cutscenes as much as we can and going back to interactive scene system, from avoiding loading screens, from trying everything to keep us in the body of the character. Still, the player is a different person, and the player has different abilities to interact with the system, and they have a different perspective of wants and needs that will always be a consideration that plays into the game. So normally I would close this now with a snappy AI meme of welcoming our new AI overlords or something like that. But I actually want to take this topic a little bit more serious. And as I said, I wrote my bachelor thesis about it. So with the coming advent of AI, I would like to leave you 3 small remarks about sentient AIs. First, operational capacity of an AI does not necessitate sentience. That means the fact that AIs become more and more competent and are better and better to simulate things that we used to think of exclusive human domains, right? That doesn't prove that there's anything happening as some kind of subjective reality in their mind, right? Those 2 things are not in a direct correlation. There's no proof for that. However, we would have a real problem of recognizing sentience in AI, because how would they tell us? And what would actually be criteria that would satisfy us if they are able to pretend to be human in the most convincing way? Isn't it just some form of speciesism or carbonism for us to reject that idea just because it's built on a different material? Recognizing conscious is a challenge. However, we must separate the idea of sentience from autonomy. What might be a danger to us is an autonomous AI, is an AI that might not be in our control anymore. But that is a different question than if the AI has a point of view. If it has feelings, if it has impressions, that is not a danger to us. On the contrary, the questions of AI sentience is not relevant in regard to protecting us from AI. The question of AI sentience is relevant from protecting AI from us. Or, in other words, ask not what sentient AI can do for you, ask what you can do for sentient AI. Thank you very much.